there for 10 days. I'm coming home for the weekend on the 19th, and then I go back on the Sunday night.
And you have treatment every day?
Every day, and 2 days, twice.
Yeah. I know my brother's just gone through a session, but he's got a clean bill for 6 months. 6 months probably now.
Good.
Get this to Janine and save him some money. Recycling.
There we go. Thanks. We're waiting for one more. We're going to wait a couple more minutes. All right, 30 seconds. Hello, Arthur.
Hey there.
You ready? Welcome to the meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission for Tuesday, September 9th, 2014. You have the agenda in front of you. Are there any comments? Hearing none, I will say that it's adopted. Is there any public comment at this time? It is time for the annual election of officers of the commission, chair and vice chair, which we postponed from July. Oh, first of all, I should introduce Mr. Buscarin. I'm sorry, our newest commissioner.
Aren't you very kind? Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Do we do this first?
No,
Okay.
no. So,
Meeting being recorded.
the meeting is being recorded, yes, thank you. Are there any nominations for the chair?
I'll nominate Dan Drake for the chair.
I'll second that motion.
Are there any other nominations? I guess I'll ask for a vote. How do you all vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Vice chair?
I will nominate Mr. Gasparo.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your support.
Thank you.
The Master Plan and Sustainability Program update. This is sort of out of order because
Okay, I was gonna say.
let these guys get home, but we're going to spend
And-
some time on this.
Before I turn it over to our consultants with Jacobs, I just wanted to emphasize and go through what I'd like to accomplish tonight. Before I get started, there are some sections in Chapters 6 and 7 that may be deemed sensitive security information, so it might be redacted. If you have any questions, let me know, but there were some parts in there that were deemed to be sensitive information, so we had to pull those out. I just want to emphasize to the commissioners tonight that we're getting into the phase of the master plan that is going to become critical. Chapter 6, the facilities requirement, will identify what is necessary. Chapter 7 will then look at alternatives and analysis of those. Out of these two and subsequent chapters will come the airport layout plan. And you may recall there's two documents that the FAA approves in a master plan, the forecast and the airport layout plan. After the presentation, we'll show you an example of an ALP, or airport layout plan, and I'll kind of go through what's covered on it. The critical parts, I think, or most critical, are that, one, if a project is not on an airport layout plan, it is not even looked at from FAA's perspective for eligibility for funding. So if you were to apply for a grant, the first question they're going to ask is it on the airport layout plan? So we want to make sure that the necessary items get on there and that in the proper manner. So again, I'm going to emphasize the importance of these, but now a little more on the topic. I was going through the process by which we should vet these various chapters. And what I'd like to propose, and we'll go through this in just a second, is essentially have the commissioners review, comment back to me, then go back to the advisory committee because they've been through this process, let them know where we are, and then possibly I'd like the commission to consider a public workshop where it could be open to the public and we can communicate it to the Board of Selectmen, town administration, and the general public. So again, I didn't want any surprises when we submit to the FAA for approval of the airport layout plan. And Bill Richardson from Jacobs is here tonight, kind of give us a 30,000-foot overview of where we are in the process, what is coming up, and what's in some of these chapters and some things that you'll see. But I just want to emphasize the need for your input and feedback. And if you have no feedback, that's fine. I just need to know that with these next chapters. So I will be getting you out a final draft shortly of Chapter 6. 7 is still in the works. We went through both of those today, page by page. And so I'll be getting you these out and asking for a time frame to get back to me so that we can keep this on schedule. But I just wanted Bill to come in today, kind of go over where we are and emphasize the critical nature of these documents and how they're going to eventually roll into the airport layout plan, which is the big, if you will, it's the big coup de grace of the master plan itself. So, Bill, do you want to?
Thanks, Tom. And Bill Richardson, Jacobs, project manager for the master plan. I think you have the handouts there. We'll start with the schedule. Basically, we have had that last advisory committee workshop where basically we got a series of potential impacts or potential concepts, alternative concepts, and we got the meeting in sort of late spring, and we've been working on it through summer and into the fall, basically digesting those alternative concepts that we had discussed with the advisory committee. So if you will, we sort of fed the top of a funnel, and it's coming down through now, and we're looking at how to proceed into the implementation plan, which is what we're starting now with chapters 6 and 7. And then that will tie into the financial feasibility plan based upon the priorities that the commission comes up with, along with the advisory committee. And that's an iterative process, back and forth, based on the costs and the phasing of when we think we can afford to do different things, what happens before another in terms of the sequence. That all then goes into the final airport layout plan, which is the document that is the actual drawing, that is the outline of what all those projects are that comes out of the process. And it's not until that's all been vetted here locally and everybody agrees on what's in there, as well as the financial feasibility, that it even goes to FAA for their signature and approval. The airport signs it first, that plan. It's actually a sheet, a drawing. The state then signs it, and then FAA signs it. And once that happens, it becomes basically the outline for what happens for the next 5, 10, even 20 years, if that's what we end up putting on there. There are no priorities that are on that drawing. The priorities are set through your annual capital improvement program with the FAA and the state, which you do every year in terms of the big projects. But the financial plan, which is going to be developed jointly between ourselves, yourself, and PB Aviation, our subcontractor, will be the next step that comes after this setting of the priorities and the sort of initial cost estimates. So that's the overview of the schedule. The next slide is sort of a...
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Mr.
Yep.
Richardson. Just to pick up on the point Mr. Rafter made, In terms of the near term, the next 6 weeks or so,
Yes,
and your term for public outreach really means the advisory committee, does it not?
correct.
Whereas I think Mr. Rafter was suggesting some real public outreach, that is, to the public at large and the neighborhood groups and so forth. So what we're talking about is the next step after this meeting being a meeting of the advisory committee, are we not?
No.
I
I think, Dan, again, looking at it from kind of an inverse pyramid, I'm looking at input from the commission first.
Right.
So there'll be a period
Right,
of time for
I'm sorry,
commissioners.
yeah.
And then, yes, an advisory committee, and then a public workshop,
Right.
whether it's commission.
So,
however
but
many.
I'm sorry, I was sort of truncating the first part. But
Okay.
the next sort of formal
Well-
get-together will be an advisory committee meeting.
Correct.
And that will be when? When would you like to schedule that?
Well, I would think we should shoot for sometime October,
Yeah,
early
we
October.
have that in here, in, I think, the third or fourth slide for October.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
just since we're looking at the overall schedule.
Yeah.
And
But that,
then,
you're right, Dan, that would then be followed by a broader public meeting.
which would be sometime presumably in November.
Correct.
Correct.
And concurrent with that, we would be working on the financial management plan,
Right.
feasibility study.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So the basic issues are the 5 categories that we agreed to back in the spring with the FAA and the state. And they are safety and security first and foremost, then capacity, efficiency. Tied to both or all of those are revenue enhancements, and then overarching are the environmental sustainability concepts. And that organizational structure, those 5 basic categories, carry through the remaining chapters that you'll see. Chapter 6, for example, is organized that way. Chapter 7 will have the alternatives grouped under the same 5 basic categories. The next slide is basically an overview of where we are at right now. And as Tom mentioned, the facility needs, Chapter 6 is what you have as a current draft. And again, the 5 bullets are the same. The safety, security are the FAA design standards. The capacity are existing deficiencies with some of the facilities that we have. Efficiency is where we need improvements basically for the airport facilities in terms of equipment. Revenue enhancements are a range of concepts with which will end up being surplus parcels, rates and fees adjustments, other initiatives that we can look at that will be in Chapter 7 when we get there. And then we have the environmental sustainability requirements that are ongoing as part of existing permits and special conditions. The alternative improvement concepts, Chapter 7, is the current draft that Tom and I are working on. That'll be ready probably in a week, 2 weeks for you to look at. Those will include alternatives that address those 5 generic categories, but they will also have summary statements as to what the alternative consists of, what the triggers and costs are, the pros and cons, i.e. the pluses and minuses in a summary format, and a timing as to how soon they might be necessary. And some of them will be pieces, for example, the terminal apron. There are different chunks of pavement around the terminal building that were done at different times and are in different conditions and require replacement or improvement in a phased sequence over the next 5 to 10 and sometimes longer period. So some of those will fall into each of those early, midterm, and long-term categories. After we've gone through and we're in this funneling down process, and the commission has come up with your priorities for what you think you want to focus on, after having had the public workshop, we will be setting up that priorities and implementation program. That'll be later October into early November. That also will tie into the financial feasibility plan in terms of how we are sequencing the projects, how they fall out in terms of the fundability either from FAA or from other sources, how they tie into your sense of what the capital requirements are. So the chapters 8 and 9 will be very much combined in an iterative fashion, and coordinated, I should say. And they both result then in the final airport layout plan, which Tom was mentioning. Once we've gone to the bottom of that funnel process, the screening process, those projects that we feel are necessary for the short-term, mid-term, and long-term would all appear on that airport layout plan drawing, to the extent that they are capable of being illustrated. They may be smaller or other management initiatives that are not related to the airfield, but still would be part of a process that you'll be implementing that might be more environmental, like converting the fleet into electric vehicles or something like that. It won't be specifically illustrated on the drawing, but would be part of the master plan and part of this implementation program. So that's basically the status of where we're at and why we wanted to have this opportunity to talk and work out the mechanism for getting your comments back on chapters 6 and 7 over the next few weeks, and then set ourselves up for the advisory meeting, and then talk about strategizing for the public workshop later on. The next slide, David, I think basically just summarizes some of the ideas we're coming up with for the non-aviation revenue sources. I think we've seen these before. We're talking about expanding the bunker area for additional lease parcels for light industrial or locally undesirable land uses, the LULUs. A big part of what we are seeing as a major asset of the airport is your surplus land. You've got a sizable chunk of undeveloped parcels that aren't necessarily going to be necessary for future aviation use. And that discussion and the prioritizing of what to do with those parcels is going to be a very important part of our discussion over the next month or so. And some of that includes the possibility of major solar development, which ties into some of the sustainability, carbon neutral initiatives. That is also another major revenue generator. And then there are other additional initiatives like using some of the terminal building flex space for off-season rentals for some sort of modest revenue potential that could happen separate of what would be on the ALP, for example. The next slide is basically illustrating where some of these non-aviation surplus parcels are physically located around the airfield. Down next to the Thompson House, there are 2 beachfront parcels that have potentially significant revenue value to the airport. Over in Mattoxam Valley, there's a 9-acre chunk that probably doesn't have development potential, but certainly has environmental management and resource enhancement opportunities to offset some other development that the airport might want to take. Up around the bunker area, there's 80-plus acres of different types of opportunities, whether it's for additional...
That's in addition to whatever is already
Yes,
occupied.
that's a good point, Dan. Yeah, the yellow there, the 18-acre, is the existing developed area. There's a little bit more to the side that also should be part of that. But you're right, the bulk of that is undeveloped. And there's a chunk that's up on the elbow there of Bunker Road that's another 8 acres that could be split off for most any kind of industrial, commercial, or overflow parking, or whatever you wanted to use it for. The big piece is the Delta parcel. And that has tremendous opportunities for multiple use, for a range of different uses that you want to think carefully about and work closely with the Planning Commission and the Planning Director in terms of what the opportunities are. But certainly there's chances for leasing right away some of the 5.6-acre piece that is zoned industrial or commercial that could generate revenues. The larger piece, the 43 acres, probably requires careful thought the separate triangle, the 62 acres, again, multiple opportunities for a range of different, potentially aviation uses, potentially solar, potentially other activity could go on there. So this is an example of the kind of real meaty alternative analyses that we need to chew on over the next month or so.
Just a nit.
Go
but
ahead.
How did you distinguish that the 62.4 acres on the Delta parcel was different from the other purple parcels?
Well, it's related a little bit more to the runway 24 piece. There might be more aeronautical, aviation, airport-related use, but it's a good nit to pick. The bottom line is you've got 100
I don't see what's the
acres.
difference between that and the 8.12 acres on the other side.
Correct, yep. The bottom line is they've got close to 100 acres or more up in there that is a significant chunk of property that's worth looking at. And given the fiscal constraints that the airport has had, you've got a significant opportunity for some sustained lease income.
Dan, this is one of the type of things that Bill and I started to get into today. We looked at, some of these parcels and how do we carve it up? How much goes to this or that? And they're the types of things we really would like to get some input on and discussion. So it's just, there's a tremendous amount of potential. I think the key is, first, let's decide, do we want to sell or lease which? And, because we need to develop a sustainable income stream as well.
Is planning and zoning aware of any of this?
We
Yes.
have met with them. I have a follow-up meeting next week with them. But we've taken them around and, went through this whole layout with them. They indicated what some of the challenges might be that we're going to face, and we're going to go through some of that next week again, too.
But we also have to have FAA approval. of
Yes.
Use of the land.
Right.
Yes.
But the first step is to identify it as not necessary for future aviation use, in other words, non-aeronautical use. And some of it already is on the prior ALPs. But you're right. Ultimately, there has to be a surplus parcel process that we go through, and perhaps some environmental reviews.
We'll keep the FAA engaged in the process. First, obviously, we want to get input from the commission. It's not going to be, okay, we'll finish it and drop it on their lap, and then, they shoot it back
Right.
and say disregard or something.
Is there any policy developed by the Airport Commission to differentiate stuff we want to, once you sell it, it's gone forever?
Correct.
I'm a little concerned about selling anything. I don't know if there's any policy, Dan, or the other commissioners, about selling or leasing. Leasing seems attractive.
To my knowledge, there isn't any, and this is
Yeah.
what we're trying to formulate.
Leasing seems attractive. Selling doesn't seem so attractive, because it's an asset.
You're right.
Good point.
Once it's gone, it's gone. If you sell it,
But there's some that may be difficult to lease, too, that might have a higher priority selling. I don't know.
the problem with selling is someone builds houses, and then they're going to be complaining about the noise.
That's why
that's
FAA
a
has-
guarantee.
That's why FAA
That's
has
a
to approve
guarantee.
it.
Let me, may I ask another question?
Yes, Dan.
Please. The area to the southwest of the 63.7, the sort of the green space, which is, I guess, that's inside the fence, I believe, at the moment. But,
Where's the
The 83.7?
no, I'm sorry, the
Around the
83,
buffer,
excuse me, the
is
83.7, yes. Would any of that space? Sure. I'm talking about this area right along there. If, for example, we decided we needed more hangars,
Yes.
would that space be available for something like that?
Yes, you might use that as well as a strip inside the purple, the blue. I mean, the boundaries aren't cast in stone.
Is this the fence line?
No, the fence line goes over on the out, it jogs in and then comes down along the outer boundary there, yeah.
You can see the road.
Right, so most of that, well, the fence comes across from the bunker area, the yellow
From here?
does more or less like that.
Okay.
But the bottom line is that a lot of this is up to your prioritizing and balancing. And where the boundaries end up
Well, I
is,
think it would be very helpful for us. I mean, I don't know if the rest of the commission agrees with me, but I think it would be very helpful for us to have a starting point of what,
That's what Chapter 7, I think, will do.
okay.
It will give you some potential alternatives and analysis on those
But
alternatives.
sort of, from the aviation standpoint, prioritize, or at least state any needs that might be out there, such as hangar space,
Yeah. that's-
that might be, sort of be the first
Right.
thing. That's sort of the cream that you have to skim off,
right.
looking at it from one perspective,
Mhm.
and then deal with the rest. But I think that has to be part of the consideration.
That's in
Yes.
7, you'll see that in there.
For example, Dan, in the triangular blue thing up that you were just asking about, is the 62.4, the existing ALP shows a long line of potential box hangars going up into that area, which we may want to keep as a concept, as a potential future aeronautical footprint, for example, as well as down along the
Belvedere Beach?
yeah, David, you could drag in the existing ALP. We were going to talk about this anyway, so,
Let me just make a comment first. That
Oh, go ahead.
This is strictly for illustrative purposes only. And I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time, whenever you're looking at an ALP, you really need to look and make sure it is signed by all parties. We had an issue where we were trying to locate something a few months ago. We had 5 versions, some signed by some people, some signed by another. Finally got to the heart of, we had the same one that the state had, that the feds had, that everybody had. So this is not an actual, it's just for illustrative purposes.
for illustrative purposes, this area, for example, is on the signed version of the current ALP. So it sits into the blue area, and it could be retained or carved out and simply left as a future aeronautical use chunk.
Is there any demand, Tom, for more hangars?
I hear it anecdotally, but I don't, and David deals with it all the time, but we try to update every 6 months, and there's nothing that I know of that, there's a demand for reasonably priced, already constructed hangars, but not to build new ones.
There was the general aviation, these small airplanes operated by single owners. That's in a long-term downtrend right now. I mean, that's dying off fast.
That's why I say, if
So,
there were hangar space available in excess and we could give it to them at a very reasonable rate, we'd have them filled.
Yeah.
But to build new ones, right now, we don't see the demand. I mean, we can put out I was contemplating and I don't know if we could do this through procurement, but a general RFQ or RFP that might include hangars or any other potential opportunities for development on aeronautical. Broad-ranging type thing, just to keep it open, so that people wanted to submit proposals, they could.
But we're also coming up with additional areas just in the North Apron that reflect some prior proposals that we'd had for replicating hangars in that area as well. So in addition to this one, which at the time was responsive to large box, sort of high-end corporate jet users.
If I
Go
recall,
ahead.
too, in the draft of 7, there were at least 3 different types
Yes.
of hangar
Right,
development parcels being looked at.
right.
You'll see that in the alternatives when we get to 7.
Another concept was along the former pit area, which has now been subdivided. We're talking about, again, an RFP or a commercial combo type hangar unit, which might alternate small GA with a commercial space with small GA, more or less as a through the fence thing, just to push FAA, and see what we get back in terms of mixed use to help pay for the square footage and generate revenue. So there are a series of those kinds of concepts that are coming in this Chapter 7 that you'll see. And I think it's very important, and I feel somewhat constrained by the fact that we can't sit down like we are here and have a session and just talk back and forth, but evidently there are meeting laws or open meeting constraints that
Well,
we
they
have to
we can do it, but they have to be posted.
Yeah, So, and I'd be perfectly willing to do that. I think if it would be helpful, if you can.
My logic in saying the process I stated before was kind of giving some respect to the advisory committee because of their input that they've already had, and giving them another look at this before it goes out. They've been vested with us, they've helped us. I just thought, out of courtesy, we would take it from the commission to the advisory committee and then out to the public, so.
And I still think that's viable. What I'm talking about is we've had that advisory committee basically fill the top of the funnel, and what we're talking about now is winnowing it down, and then going back to the advisory committee and saying, okay, we've taken your ideas, and these are
Well, it's just making
Yeah.
sure we're right.
correct, yes. So I
And
see
then
that
taking it
as a
back to the
logical
public
process.
So there are no surprises.
Right. They might not see everything that they asked for, but
Mr. Gasparo?
If I may, I think
Yes.
a lot of the advisory committee meetings that have happened have simply been you feeding the committee information and really no feedback from the advisory committee. And I would hope that the next one is more starting to lay out some suggestions that have been developed and some choices to actually
Right.
then not just have it be an informational session, if you will, but so that there is an opportunity to choose between X, Y, and Z, if you will, to then give that more
I
as
think we
as some
might as well
feedback.
give the, unfortunately, we can't buy them champagne when it's over, but at least give them a full afternoon or a full, 4 hours or so.
Yeah.
To discuss this, so that they discuss it and they don't just click at the end.
I was going to say, I think a good discussion, but at the same time, let them weigh in on the prioritization of the projects.
Yeah.
The clickers at the end, we can say, okay, let's take this
Right.
project. Which alternative do you,
And I think that for that meeting, it'll be important to have, from the consultant's point of view to the committee, some alternatives that you've developed as opposed to sort of just a big bucket, and then what does the committee come up with?
that's
you'll see that.
where we're
in
at.
seven.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
All right,
So basically, then, we see this next process as being the heart of, or the next month, I should say, 2 months, being the heart of the whole process, and coming up with the underpinnings for what will then become the financial plan and the airport layout plan. We can go to the next slide. And this just reviews the existing revenue sources that we have now from the FAA and the state, with some improvements to the benchmarking of the airport's rates and charges, which we will be looking at when we get into the financial plan in terms of how we fine-tune and tweak and improve, increase, and make more competitive our rates and structures.
how much stress testing, if you will, does the FAA like to see in these plans in terms of financial alternatives? In other words, you've got sort of a steady state situation, and then you've got potentially a better situation, but more likely a worse situation because of changes in the economy or
Yeah.
geopolitical events or whatever
Yes.
it might be. Do they look at that at all? Are they?
Well, they do, but they don't, and I defer to Andrea a certain amount. The FAA is this huge organization. They've got a lot of issues that they deal with, but regionally, when we go and we're working with the planners and the people we work with week to week, they want to see the airport succeed, and they want to see it be sustainable. And they're going to be supportive of initiatives that we take here locally to make sure that we are sustainable financially and from the standpoint of meeting the safety standards.
I was thinking of it more from the perspective of the sort of the rude shock that everybody got, we and the FAA got in 2012 when it turned out we didn't have all the money we thought we had.
Dan,
Well, we're not going to plan for that again, but I'm just thinking more in terms of if there were a major downturn.
if I can,
Yeah.
typically in a master plan, they're more concentrated on the capital aspect. If you recall, early on in this, before we embarked on this master plan, we discussed with FAA providing a little latitude to get into some of the operating and revenue enhancement and things like that, so that we can meet our grant assurance for self-sustainability. And they allowed us that latitude. That's why our financial section in the master plan is a little broader than the typical one.
But
So-
I'm thinking more in terms of, all right, we come up with an ALP, and, or AIP, whatever it is, and everything's going along fine, and then all of a sudden, there's some major
That's why we have to meet with them each year and
Right.
give them
But
the
if
5
we
years.
basically back off because of our perceived inability to take on more debt, let's say, because of the
Right.
downturn in the economy, fewer people playing the PFC, fewer people buying jet fuel and so forth.
Right.
I mean, that's all factored in those annual meetings.
That's
rather
correct.
than-
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
to reorganize
This-
our priorities each
The master plan is sort of an overview depiction of your long-term goals and objectives, and within that, then you respond to annual, year-to-year reality.
Where I'm coming from, just so everybody knows, is that I'd like to see this as a master plan that we can live with and adhere to over as much as practicable over the next 5 or however many years, rather than being something that we do and immediately ends up on the shelf, as previous ones have to in large measure.
I would like to see it as, just like, as a guidance document
Right.
for us to refer to and.
Correct.
Therefore, it has to be something we have confidence in.
Right.
That's why we want to make sure we get these sections right.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, coming to the next steps and milestones, we need to work out a methodology for the commission to review and comment on prioritizing the improvements over the next 5, 10, 20 years during this month, during September. And as we mentioned, we'll have the Chapter 7 out to you as soon as we get into the corrections that Tom and I just talked about. Then I see us having this working group advisory meeting sometime in October, mid-October, followed by a public workshop in November. The financial feasibility plan, I show it here November, December, but it can start in October as soon as we start getting priorities worked out and costs. That'll be a living, breathing feasibility kind of iterative process between ourselves and PB with their benchmarking input. And then at the end, once we've gone through all of that, then we do the airport layout plan with the future improvements, and that goes to FAA in December at the end of the year.
What's the difference, since I was struggling with it a moment ago, between the airport layout plan and the airport improvement plan?
The airport layout plan is a physical
The
sheet of
document
paper.
we've been talking about here.
Right. And the capital improvement plan is basically the instrument that prioritizes the projects that are illustrated on that ALP. So the airport layout plan sort of sets out the broad brush physical improvements over the next 10, 15, 20 years. But the CIP is your financial feasibility plan and looks at how you're going to pay for things in what sequence.
AIP, Dan, is the
Oh.
actual funding
From FAA.
Yeah,
source.
that's the
of
FAA
system.
legislation.
The airport
that-
improvement program. It's a federal funding program for all of it.
Oh, it's not a plan, it's a program.
It's a program,
Thank
the
you.
AIP is, yes.
Funds from AIP.
Think I
Under,
get this
into which
straight by now.
your CIP fits.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson.
And they give you 90% of every dollar, basically, right now, for the major capital projects. So that's basically where we're at. So I thank you, and if there's any questions, we can talk about them, but we'll just keep going as quickly as we can to get stuff to you.
Are there any questions, Mr. Casparo?
In terms of the first point with the 5, 10, 20-year improvements plan, are we going to have something from you, essentially a menu, perhaps, if for lack of a better word, that we're going to be able to work with? And, you know, it's already September 9th, so when will we be, you know, we're going to need some time as well. And
The draft guts of that menu we just went through today. And the menu itself, we've got in a sort of a preliminary list.
Perfect, thank you, that's,
Yep.
thanks. That's
And
what
then
I
you'll
was-
get a document that explains each of those alternatives with
The problem is
illustrative.
it's front-loaded, and now we want to start saying, okay, let's establish priorities, but also sequencing and phasing.
No,
Yeah.
This is exactly the sort
Yeah.
of thing I was hoping to see.
And just to anticipate, Art, you'll notice, and Tom just commented, everything seems to be front-loaded into the next 3 or 5 years, but many of those are management initiatives, and they're sort of they're non-capital intensive, but aimed at revenue generation that you can do now.
Great.
So, okay.
Anybody else have a question? I have one last one then. The plan, the airport layout plan only encompasses those things which are reimbursable by the FAA. Is that correct?
No.
Not necessarily, it
Well,
tends to be that, but not necessarily,
Okay.
yeah.
For example, Dan, if somebody came and wanted to invest money and build a hangar and it was not on your layout plan, you couldn't do that either. So
All right.
it's-
Is there any way to incorporate in this process, so we get an overall picture, those things that are not part of this plan, or such as you described, such as equipment and so forth, that is reimbursable in part perhaps by the state, and things that are not reimbursable at all, that are going to be part of the capital needs of the airport over the next 5, 10 years? Because
They're not necessarily, what do you call it? Let me back up. The master plan doesn't get down into looking at individual pieces of equipment and what their life cycles are, but your annual CIP meetings with the state and the FAA do
and just
that.
And
thinking-
the long-term financial feasibility is supposed to identify the funding sources, whether it's,
Well-
and take into account equipment purchase, for example.
I'm looking at, well, I was looking at, somewhere in here, there is a list of the capital requirements that were going to the town for approval.
Yes.
And a number,
When-
some of those are not part of the
They're
ALP.
not funded, yes.
And they're not funded. Some of them are funded by the state, and some of them are not, and some of them are funded entirely by us.
Right. The financial, and
Right.
correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I'm used to with the financial plan, especially an expanded one, it will look at our entire picture. It
Okay.
looks at our operating costs, it looks at everything, and says, okay, here's what you can afford, and this is why it's feasible. Whether it be from a private funding source, a governmental funding source, or pay through our own accounts or whatever. So that should all be identified in the financial plan.
Okay.
What is the question, what is this document, fiscal year 16, TON capital request? Is that
We're
what
going
it's
to come,
talking-
that's what I'm
Okay.
talking about. We'll come to that,
That's
back to
on the
that.
agenda for later. That's our
Now,
capital
I'm
request.
sorry, I have one question. Mrs. Planzer handed something to Mr. Gasparo that explained whatever it was to him. Do we all
I
get that? or-
apologize, yeah, it was, again, I just got it today. and
Okay,
just
so
looking to go-
you can send it via email or whatever to us,
Yeah,
or
I can-
not?
It'll be all part of what you
Yeah,
send to
we'll
us
have
for
to.
Okay,
comment,
all
right?
right, thank you.
You're welcome to look at it if you want. yeah.
No, that's okay, thank you.
We just talked about it for the first time this afternoon. It
Okay.
just-
Yeah, this side of the table is feeling very much disadvantaged.
Sorry, but I haven't even read it, I just saw it. so.
And I will going to make one very simple comment.
Yes, Jeanette.
That when you gave me this handprint of the parcels of land, I cannot read any, or very few of the acreage. So if there's a way that you can do them like you did some of them
Okay.
springing out,
Okay.
just for these old eyes, thank you.
Sure. I use these to great
Yeah, well-
advantage.
That doesn't even help, thank you very much, Mr. Richardson.
And Jeanette, we do have large-scale drawings of all
Yes.
of the parcels, because trust me, I go through the same thing.
Well, when I was looking at this, had you not had it up there, I would have no clue on a lot of the acreage.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Is that it?
That's,
On
thank
that?
you.
Yeah, I just would urge everybody, when the material comes, to get to it and get back to
And
Mr. Rafter.
If you have
with
no
your
comment, just let me know that, so I can close it out and keep moving, because we got to get this one rolling, so.
All right, thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Richardson.
Thank you.
We need to go back and do the minutes and so forth. You were waving at me, and I
Sorry.
didn't pay attention. We have minutes from the 15th of July. Are there any comments or questions on those?
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We have just gotten as a handout the minutes of August 12th. Would you rather wait till next
Please.
meeting?
Please, yeah, I haven't had a chance.
Fair enough. We have 2 warrants to ratify, August 20th and September 3rd. Is there a motion to ratify those warrants?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And I'll abstain. I didn't sign that one.
Okay. Well,
Pep-
The 20th?
Also the 10th.
and then we have the approval of the warrant of the 10th.
I'll move approval of the warrant of September 10th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are going on to pending leases and contracts, which are covered in the,
We have,
I have another, but
sorry.
there's another warrant. Did we do both of the
yeah, we did both.
820 and 93?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
together.
We did
I
them
didn't sign
together.
it.
I did them
So-
together because we really don't discuss them. Okay. I did point out, by the way, on the one of 9-3, that the last batch was put in there after Mr. Gasparo and Mrs. Topham signed it, and that is not supposed to happen.
I don't believe, I could be wrong. One was Mr. Rafter had not done it, and I came back the following day and signed. Is that the
As it
one?
was, the reason I let it go through, there were only 2 items in it, both very small.
Okay.
One was a reimbursement to Mr. Carberg for a couple of things, $100 and some, and I don't remember now what the other one was, but it was not a big deal.
I could be wrong. It was one day that Mr. Rafter had not looked at everything, and I went and looked at it, and I went back the following
Right,
day.
but this one was,
Okay.
this one was definitely slipped in
Okay.
after the fact,
yeah,
which is
I've
something
discussed that with.
the auditors had not liked before.
Understand it.
So, in fact, I'm surprised the town let it go through, frankly, but be that as it may. Okay. Leases and contracts.
We have 2 lease agreements, one with Tradewind Aviation for their operations, and the other with U.S. Airways for their operations at the airport. And 2 contracts, one for Cobo Utility. We have to enter into a contract because of the level of money spent with them, and that is for the piping for the irrigation system for the General Aviation Building. The other is a MHQ supply for a Ford F-250 operations vehicle, which was in the budget and borrowed for.
Are there any questions? Let's take the leases and then the contracts separately. Is there a motion to approve the 2 leases with Tradewind Aviation and U.S. Airways?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Is there a question? All those in favor?
Aye.
The contracts with Cobo and MHQ Supply. Questions? Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Dan, I'd just like to mention one thing, too, on these airline agreements. They're required to provide us with reports monthly, and Jamie has done a tremendous job creating a new, somewhat interactive report with drop-down menus and things that is going to be very helpful, and we're transitioning into that now. So it's just a major improvement over the old paper and then data input and everything else, it's all electronic, so it's great.
All right. Thank you. Pending matters, Mr. Rafter?
The town MOU for procurement. I haven't had a chance to put pen to paper yet, but we had a meeting last week with the procurement officer and the finance department representatives for the town. And I have to say, they started and throughout the entire meeting were just very appreciative of the expertise that Janine brings to the table in terms of procurement. she has put us on the right track and set us out as an example for the way to do the procurement. And they were very, very appreciative and acknowledged her expertise. So, as usual, I'd just like to thank her. But we had a meeting. We had some questions answered. We helped them answer some questions. And we discussed the basic parameters that will go into the MOU. So I should have that available for the next meeting. I'll have a draft of that, and I'll be sending it over to them as well. Any questions on that? Or okay. On the formerly used defense site, just an update, the tenants have been notified. The other two groups that have submitted proposals have been notified that we canceled procurement. We have identified the parcels out on Sun Island Road that you may have seen when Mr. Richardson was showing the master plan. The next step for that is we need to get appraisals on those parcels, so we'll be moving ahead with that. And I just want the Commission to be aware that we have received a request for relief from one of the tenants in the bunker area because of the impact of the floods, and we're going to be reviewing that to determine whether or not it's reasonable and go over it with council. So we'll keep you posted on that one.
Any questions?
What's the reason for the appraisal?
It's a requirement that we have to do in terms, I guess it's through procurement, in order to establish fair market value. But we have to, we can't charge any less than fair market value according to FAA regulations.
Thank you.
All right.
Move on to personnel.
Personnel.
I've been in contact with Don Jacobs on the salary compensation classification study. He's provided me with a proposal. He today sent some clarification, follow-up on it. It did come in under the amount that the Commission previously authorized, so I'll be proceeding with that. The first step is a review of job descriptions, which I have found to be more difficult than I anticipated. Trying to get them in alignment between the union handbook, what's on the payroll, and what is in the file for an actual job description. We're trying to make sure they're all aligned. Over the past several years, some jobs have been created and the job titles haven't been updated or job descriptions, so we're working through that. Then I'll get with Mr. Jacobs. He will format them accordingly for his needs, and he'll proceed. He's also identified the airports that he'll be benchmarking us against. So we're moving along with that, and I will try to get you a schedule as soon as possible, too. The other item we have under personnel is to ratify the change to the non-union personnel manual. You may remember that there were some questions, and our legal counsel has gotten back to us. Should be in your packet. He provided some language, I believe, to address the concerns that were expressed.
It was with the handouts, and I've already buried it somewhere. That's all right, I remember. Are there comments or questions on this, the revision and language that's put in red and that language which you otherwise approved back in August?
Didn't we discuss this?
We did. I wanted it, I would have preferred to have it say, if practicable, because I do still think there are situations where it might not be practical to get either Mr. Rafters or his designees authorization. But I'm not going to make a federal case out of it. This is what council thinks it should say. That's fine with me.
My only question would be, and perhaps it's implied and doesn't need to be added, but should it say, or by the manager's designee? Or is it just
that's
or by
probably, yeah.
designee?
I think that probably would make it a little cleaner.
In other words, who appoints the designee? If you said, or by the airport manager's designee,
Right.
or is that redundant?
No, it's not. I don't think it's redundant. The
And-
manager or the manager's
Clear in that one.
And I
designee.
thought that's what we had discussed.
That is what we
Which we
discussed,
wanted,
yeah.
right. But did he not feel it was,
I don't think he thought.
Legal?
I don't think he thought
or
about
he
it.
thought?
I don't.
Is that not what it says?
No, it says, or by designee.
In absence of airport manager.
Right,
but
but it doesn't say
the
who
airport.
appoints the designee.
Oh, I see what
First,
you're
if you
saying.
said, or by
God bless
Bless
you.
you.
the manager's designee.
Okay, so appointed by,
And,
The airport managers. I think that clarifies it. That's a
Right.
good point.
So do we want to go bring this back to the,
No,
No, okay,
we'll just
no,
adopt it with that
okay.
change, I think.
just making sure.
Let's not incur any more legal.
Yeah, that'll be a
Okay.
$200 word.
All those in favor of adopting the language as modified by council and corrected by the commission?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. DOT grant awards and associated assurances.
The first order of business there, I believe, is the signing authority. Each year, the commission, I believe, has to vote on giving signing authority for the grants.
I'll make a motion to endorse the document for the signing authority.
You have to make, the motion has to include the name.
For the chairman. I already buried it. That's all I was, here we go, I'll get it out.
Second.
I'll make a motion to endorse the letter of authorization dated September 9, 2014, for the airport commissioners to authorize Dan Drake, chairman, to sign off on behalf of the entire commission.
Second.
Thank you. I would just appreciate it if
Yeah,
it didn't
clear.
have my whole
Yeah,
name,
I
full
just-
name in it. The
Daniel
author is
Drake.
Daniel W. Drake. He said Dan Drake.
It will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he said Dan Drake.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, then next is
Did we have a vote?
the two grant,
Wait,
oh, I'm sorry, you made that motion, is there a second?
I second it.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do you want us to execute this document at this point, or not?
Well,
No,
we'll
show the
have,
final.
To the end.
I'll have it after
Okay.
the meeting.
and we have the security upgrades, grant assurances for a grant of 19,400.
Make a motion to accept the security upgrade grant assurances, $19,400.
A second?
I'll second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ARC vehicle grant assurance is $31,875. Is there a motion to approve that, or to accept it? I'm sorry, whatever. Is
I'll
there,
make that motion.
thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried unanimously. Capital requests. Now
Dan-
we're getting to your little sheet.
Dan,
Mr.
if I may,
Buscarin.
before we go,
Yeah.
just so the commission's aware, the next step now is that tomorrow night, these will go to the Board of Selectmen, and they have to sign the grant assurances as well. And I don't know if I'm overstepping myself here, getting ahead of myself, but in the discussions we had with procurement about what will be in the MOU, one of the things that they're going to require is that there be 3 commissioners signing contracts for the airport. The logic being that essentially the commission could vote something down 3-2, and 2 commissioners could sign that, and it would still go through. So the new finance director said he wants to have the 3 signatures, which I think makes sense. So I just wanted to make you aware of those.
3 signatures on the,
Yeah. So,
all right.
okay.
So we are up to the capital requests.
There was a bit of a...
Well, just if I may, just for Mr. Buscarin's benefit, we have to go through a process with the town every year. We go first to the capital projects committee.
First the town administration and
Yeah,
the capital projects.
well,
And
That's a
what-
courtesy. And then to the capital,
But now, we just said that Dan could sign off as chairman.
For
On grant
grants.
paperwork.
Oh, okay, but this is,
For contracts.
oh, for
contracts.
contracts, okay.
Do we have to change, I guess we should change, technically, we should change our,
We will. The policy,
yeah, should we vote on it now? Oh, next meeting?
whatever you want.
That's why I say I was getting ahead of myself, because we talked about doing that at the next meeting, so.
Well-
I just wanted to give you a heads up. It's coming.
All right, let's do it at the next meeting, whatever. So there is a process that we have to go through. It starts with the capital projects committee. and then ultimately goes to the Finance Committee to review all projected capital outlays, capital projects. This is the first step in that
Okay.
process.
Thank you.
And this is the local process that is not necessarily completely in sync with the federal process. We go to them in October to discuss our capital improvement plan. So I may have to come back and forth to the capital committee and let them know if FAA denied something or wants to give us more money or those types of things. So if I may, Dan, you have before you the list of requests with the funding sources. There's one more, and again, there was a slip-up this year. I missed an email and missed the deadline for these, but we got them in over the weekend. There's one more that may be outstanding that I'm not sure if we're going to be required to or not by law. It's called a regeneration pad for our fuel trucks, and it has to do with the new emission standards that our fuel trucks have to meet, and you have to be able to burn them off. But I'm hearing different stories from the industry that nobody's building these pads or getting another way to do that. So I'm still researching it, but
If you see one of our fuel trucks out on the Milestone Road.
racing up and down, you'll know what it is. But I have a meeting with Libby next week to go over our capital requests. And I can go through these individually, just give you a quick briefing. The fuel farm pipes, paint and repair, they're in desperate need of it. If we're actually getting two prices, but if in fact we were to bring the entire thing up to standard, we may have to change all pipes to stainless, which would be extremely expensive. This is basically just a state of good repair type of number here. The stair truck / ramp is the loading ramp that we use for JetBlue and some others. We have one that's about 7 years old and in need of rehabilitation, but more importantly, my concern is that it's a single point of failure. If that piece of equipment goes down, we could have people stranded on board an aircraft, and we just don't want that to happen. So,
And they don't provide that.
no, well, it depends on the airport, but it was part of their requirement when they came here that we had to provide it. So we could go to them and they say, we don't need one, you have one. But again, I'm doing this from a reliability standpoint because whether it's JetBlue or some of the charters that we get in, we've had DC-9, 737s, just had another DC-9 in. So I just think it's in the best interest of the airport to have that accessibility. The next is a replacement tug. We currently have in for a small tug, this is what I would consider to be a medium-sized tug. This tows around the smaller corporate jets. Our big one is still in good condition, but this is a medium-sized tug. The next is a snow plow and blower machine that was part of the certification inspector's recommendations when she observed our equipment. We have one piece, it's fairly old, and we need to have additional equipment there. The next is a utility vehicle, which is essentially a pickup truck with the work boxes on the side, primarily for our airfield electricians who have to go out every morning and, based on the evening inspection, repair, replace light bulbs, fixtures, things of that nature, and so they need a lot of equipment with them. The next is the ramp rehabilitation for the aircraft parking area, which would be consistent with the state pavement condition index mapping that they've done for us. The next is the design of a ground service equipment storage facility. We currently have a garage that fits 2 larger pieces and 1 small piece of equipment in it, and we have about 8 or 9 pieces of equipment that we store throughout the airport in various hangars and some outside and wherever. So we're looking at designing either an addition or a new, just basic facility for that.
How big a facility would that be, John? Square feet?
I just saw that this afternoon, and I forget because we were joking about how it came up to something in 2 feet. It's probably maybe a 20 by 30, something in that neighborhood, you know.
You used to be able to build the building for $150.
That's what I was wondering.
Now we're talking $150 just for the design?
Well, that's why we were asked about that this morning.
This could be reduced too significantly.
That seems a little heavy.
Especially if it's a prefab Butler-type structure. That's all I'm looking for. I'm not looking for anything fancy.
Right.
No heat, just cover. So I think they put in for a full-blown HVAC system there. I just want a shell.
How do we,
That number was actually given to us by Jacobs, and you will see it coming up in the master plan for the size.
Plenty of room for further comment there.
Now, just because it's in the plan doesn't mean we have to spend it either.
Yeah.
I just hate to, or don't like to see us go before the capital review committee
Yeah.
with something that they,
With fluff.
if our reaction is all that, they're
Well,
and have them say the
okay.
same. Is that something that,
I will look
do
at
we
that
think we
and
could do for
Or can we
100
just knock
even?
off the design?
go a design build, yeah. I
Kind
mean,
of the
There's
whole
those
thing.
modular groups. The problem honestly is going to be the site. Siting this and finding out where we can do it and building the footing. They've identified an expansion of the existing, which is not necessarily the best because its location is immediately adjacent to the ramp and it's right where the aircraft taxi. They looked at another site that took up a significant portion of the overflow rental car lot, which we're in desperate need of space there. I've asked them to look at the others. There's another site behind the fire station that it may fit on. So a lot of it's going to be site work and just preparation identifying that, but I will certainly talk to them and look at what else can be done to reduce that.
Did you say it can be designed by somebody else? Have you looked locally
Well,
or not?
In
I mean,
theory, you could put out a design build type thing, but you still have to have some site work done, or at least account for that. But then you're adding the construction cost in. So I don't know of any places on the island, but I'm sure you could probably get a manufacturer's rep to, we can get an estimate for that. So
I think it'd be worth trying because,
Yeah, I will look into that. The next one is a placeholder that may be removed as well, because Dan reminded me that there should be funds available from the GA building for the site rehabilitation, for relocation of the
it's
existing.
not the JA building per se, but it's
It
one
was
one of the other things that could be designated for the GA building.
Yeah, there were two,
Where they have already borrowed and,
right, two warrant articles that, one of them, I think, covered some of this, so I have to double check that.
That's my recollection.
Yeah.
So again, remember, I was doing this on the weekend, we threw it in as a placeholder because it was carried from last year, so I'll look at that too. The next is the repinning of the transmission overhaul of our 1988 front-end loader, and that's an estimate from the folks that do that. And the next one may be high as well. It depends on what projects we're going to be looking at, but I put it in here in the thought that in FY16, while we may be doing ramp rehabilitation, if we're going to be looking at any stub taxiways, ramp expansion, or any other new projects in 17, we're going to need to have some level of environmental work done. So it could range from nothing up to the 500,000. It's going to depend on what is deemed as the priority project for FY17. So some of this, there is things that you saw tonight. There's some areas where the environmental work is already done and it's ready to go. That would be no environmental work. We could go right to town on it. But there are some new things that may be identified on the master plan that could require some level of environmental investigation. So
I would just observe that this goes to my point in what I was talking about earlier with the master plan. This is a total expense of $761,000, but only 3 of these projects to the tune of about $125,000 are reimbursable projects. The rest are all on our dime, and if my armchair, seat of the pants, fly-by-night math is right, we'd be talking about something about an annual expense of around $100,000 with debt service on these. So it's not insignificant.
Concur.
I beg your pardon?
I concur.
And so that's why we need, when we're looking at the ALP, to also understand what the incidental
right,
not so incidental things are.
the
that go
debt
along
service
with it.
and
Right.
what the costs are. Yeah.
Are you looking for approval for this?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if we need approval or.
Well, I think if this is what you're taking to the,
You can approve it with the conditions, with the review of those
those two items, yeah.
or three, those two.
Well, there are three in the environmental impact report, but you may not know about that before you have to go to the
Right.
Capital Programs Committee.
So that's an upside number on the environmental.
I would entertain a motion to approve this with the understanding that the garage design and the FBO site rehab would be reviewed and adjusted as appropriate.
Could I have some clarification, please?
I would
Okay.
like a motion, and then
Okay.
you can get clarification, if that's all right. If there's a motion, if there's no motion, then we won't. Okay? Mrs. Topham?
I just wanted to ask if I heard Mr. Rafter saying that the loader, front-end loader, is a 1988 vehicle?
That's correct.
And is it, I know I'm going the opposite way, spending more money. Is it worth putting that much money into a 1988 vehicle? And
From everybody we've talked to, they say absolutely. We just bought a new one,
I saw,
and you remember the price on that. So this will get us probably another 10 years out of this one.
okay, thank
So-
you.
Trust me, I thought the same thing. We looked at all the options, discarding it, rehabbing it, and it's honestly best for us.
I wasn't questioning your decision, I just wanted to know if I heard properly.
Now,
Thank you.
Make a motion to adopt the FY16 Town of Nantucket capital request, subject to the possible adjustment of the discussed line items.
I'll second that. Oh, excuse me.
All right, more the merrier. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Plan.
yes, we're requesting the approval from the commission. We're a little bit late in submitting this to FAA, but it is a requirement as part of our grant assurances that we have an FAA-approved DBE plan. This was prepared by Jacobs. I've reviewed it. I didn't see any, well, the first round, we had a number of comments, and we sent back to them. But this looks pretty good from what I've seen the last
I would
round.
assume this is pretty much standard.
It is. It's a standard methodology and formula. And I've also given Mr. Sylvia the responsibility to make sure this is implemented and updated accordingly. So he will have to be represented at each pre-construction meeting and make sure that all of the contractors are aware of the goals and requirements. So
On page 10, and it probably says it, and maybe I didn't get it, on amount of goal, they have projected a federal fund shall be, is that some percentage that they figured from the work that was going to, they are anticipating being done? Or it's the last sentence in that amount of goal? Based on this amount, the expected value of
Sure,
work by the
15,000.
DBEs is?
it's a formula based on what we are anticipating each year from entitlement funds.
Okay. Thank you.
Is this required by both the FAA and the state, or is it really a state initiative?
No, there's a,
DOT.
this is
Oh, this is federal
federal.
DOT, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
this
I
is
thought it
federal,
was-
but there is a state,
There's a
I know.
state requirement also.
yeah, there is, and a different outreach program that they have, and I forget the title of it.
I'm sorry, I just assumed DOT was
The state.
yeah, but I
yes.
see it is federal. Yeah, okay. Is there a motion to approve adoption of the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Mr. Rafter.
Okay, on the project side of the house, the control tower pre-qualifications, Janine has completed that draft and is being reviewed by Jacobs and the FAA, the other Jacobs, the Virginia Jacobs. So that's moving along. The security and ARF vehicle contracts are fully executed. We have a time frame for the ARF vehicle, I believe, of a May-June time frame for delivery. The FUD's consultant will be on site on September 25th to brief the stakeholders as to what they're looking to do, but then they go back and develop their scope of work, and their further investigation, I believe, is scheduled not until March or April, so they have some work to do. We're currently out to bid for brush cutting services. We looked at a number of things. If you remember, we had a controlled burn that just wasn't working. NOAA recommended that we go with the brush cutting, and we're going out to bid to see what we can get for pricing on that. Just a heads up to the commission, had an individual request an easement on Maddox-Sham Valley Road for a pad-mounted transformer to be located on airport property. When I went out and viewed the area, I noticed that all the pad-mounted transformers are on the ocean side of Maddox-Sham Valley Road. They wanted theirs on the airport side, on airport property, and then have to go under the road. And it didn't make sense, so I called the gentleman back. He said he wasn't aware, he didn't know why, he was just a general contractor, he was going to check with his electrician. But I thought it was interesting, too, that what I observed when I was out there is that all of the transformers, pad-mounted transformers along that area have been recently cleared. The vegetation around them have been cleared. You can see it's been done very recently. So I'm not sure what, if anything, is going on there, but I just wanted to make you aware of that. We also found out, Dan contacted town administration and found out that any easement on airport property would require a town meeting. So I made the contractor aware of that as well. So if I hear anything back, I will let you know. On the operations side, on the McGrath-Santos hangars, which is hangars 5 and 6 that are attached, the wooden ones, met with Mr. Santos. He's going to be getting me a request so that we can align, if you will, what we're doing with Mr. McGrath, with Mr. Santos, because they literally are adjoined at the hip, basically. And they have issues with regard to the roof. They have made some repairs. They've received letters that they are required to make those. They have gone ahead with them, and now we're going to be looking into a new agreement for both Santos and McGrath. Just a heads up, the Commissioner of Transportation for Massachusetts, Davey, will be here on Thursday at 10 o'clock for a tour of the airport. Chris Willingborg is bringing him in, so I'll be entertaining them. On September 17th, the town is, BOS are having a housing workshop. Libby has circulated a brief draft of what the seasonal needs are and the capacities. We responded to that with what we have in the Thompson House and what we've had in terms of demand. I also indicated to Libby that I am in the process of drafting a letter to various agencies, federal and state agencies, that may have a need for either seasonal or annual housing. Because of some of the land that we have, we may be contemplating or considering that. In order to make a decision, I wanted to get an idea of the level of demand from whether it be TSA or air traffic control tower people and things like that. So I'll be sending that out next week. We're in the process, or we will be next week. We have a packet coming out from the town that will have our new budget instructions and timelines, so we're going to begin preparation of the FY16 budget. We were supposed to have a compliance presentation from the FAA tonight. That is anticipated to take between 60 and 90 minutes. Because of the timing of the master plan, I asked Dan if we could postpone that, and Tom Vick has agreed to do that as well, so I appreciate the Commission's patience with that.
When did we reschedule that for the second meeting in October?
I believe it is the 28th, is that, or something? Yes.
And we don't want to do it as a separate meeting if it's that long? Or a workshop?
Would you
whatever?
prefer that?
I think tacking on an hour, hour and a half on two.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It is a lot, but
The
another.
only good thing is it keeps the TV, it keeps the camera, and then it would be recorded.
Start earlier?
Or if we just
Well,
try to have a shorter agenda for that night.
A thought might be, too, is a workshop-type session, and we invite either a representative from Board of Selectmen and/or town administration, and even the finance department. I think there's some interested
I would
parties.
think if we kept the rest of the agenda to an absolute minimum, only things that required attention, that we could do it that night, and it wouldn't.
So we could look to schedule it for that night, and then if things start to get built up, we could have a special for the other items, maybe, I don't know.
I don't know, let's see how it goes, but we'll try to keep it, basically around that hour to hour and a half presentation, and minimize the rest of the.
I still think it would be a good idea to possibly invite
Oh,
town
yeah, absolutely.
administration and
Yeah.
whatnot
Absolutely.
if possible, and maybe make it first on the agenda.
Yeah.
So they don't have to sit through anything routine we do have to do. Same with the FAA official.
Okay, we can do that.
Fair enough.
Another item, this Thursday, I've been asked to attend, we're on the agenda for the Finance Committee. They had some questions regarding our 2014 budget, so I'm going there to answer whatever questions they may have. Just an update on the passenger facility charge. As you know, that was instituted July 1st. As of yesterday or today, we've collected about $46,783, and that's without some of the larger airlines as well.
Say that figure again, 46,000?
46,783. It should be closer to the 60,000 range. But again, it's a timing issue. Our consultant said, yeah, we'll start to see them in, the beginning of September through the mid to the third week in September, so we'll, start getting more of those in. Just a reminder, NIMS, National Incident Management Training, there's actually a requirement for airport administrative personnel and commissioners that we go through certain training, and I'll be coordinating that with our consultant that provides it. It may require a few hours of training, though, and I will get the details out to everybody as well. So, and along the same lines, we have our full-scale exercise on September 24th. It will be approximately from 8 a.m. to about 3 o'clock. And just another note, as everyone's aware, this week is the anniversary of September 11th. And in that same vein, we've had 2 unannounced TSA inspections in the past week, and Bob Tallman and Joreen and staff have done a great job, passed with flying colors. They've been called in from home at night, off duty, to come in and do some things. People were trying to penetrate the system, and they caught them, so I just want to say they've done a great job with that. So the threat is still there. On statistics, the operations are up 2% for July, which is a good sign. The employments, however, essentially flat. They're up about 8.86%. On the fuel side, the Jet A fuel gallons were down 1%, but if I recall correctly, too, the actual sales dollars were up 1%, so we're managing that as closely as we can to ensure we're not losing money. The avgas was up 1% in July, and again, it's the first month of the fiscal year, so these are all year-to-date as well. And interesting note, the freight was up 10.7% for July. So, again, I go back to what Jamie has created in terms of these reports is going to cue people in and really staying on top of what they're required to report and pay for, so that's good news. Some bad news, well, I don't want to say bad news, some different news. The noise complaints for July were up 68%. A number of those, and you'll see it, there's a whole detail that Noah provides here in the last slide, the reasoning and logic and number of repeat complainers, if you will, the ones that are associated with medical flights, the ones that are associated with us having to close the runway down for parking aircraft. So he ferrets it all out. The bottom line is the bottom line, that 96% of the complaints were responded to, and the ones that he did not investigate, respond to, were essentially abusive people that were calling and being extremely abusive with language and other things. It just, he is
Well,
essentially.
that's the two complaints from one resident.
Right, they're the only two
That's
that
the
weren't
difference, yeah.
investigated. But you can see the explanations for why, whether it was IFR or, there were some where the tower directed them, and again, he's on top of that and working with the controllers, so.
And there was a letter in the newspaper from Mr. McLaughlin, Christopher McLaughlin, addressing that
I
issue?
believe, I haven't read that, but I believe that was in response to a previous letter from one
It
of the
was, yes.
noise complainers. I apologize, I didn't get a chance to read that, but.
I mean, I think basically he's saying that, you're on an island. But, I mean, he did address it, and you have to,
It's
it's where you live.
something we have to deal with,
Right.
but we have to also make sure that, we'll get into discussion here next of subcommittees, but the Fly Friendly program is on the agenda for the next environmental subcommittee, and
Did you
Trying
just
to
have a
move forward.
tenants meeting?
we have one scheduled for next week.
Next week.
We do?
Yes. Well, we did, I don't know if it's still on the schedule.
Technically still
We technically do, we're going
And
to try to make it.
what day is that?
the 18th.
And one other thing I'd like to mention before I close. NOAA represented the airport very well yesterday at the National Association of State Airport Officials in Providence, Rhode Island. He was on a panel regarding the carbon neutral, explaining the process and where it's going and how it can be applicable to other airports and things. So got some very good feedback. Chris Willenborg is I believe, the president of NASAO currently. So NOAA's done a good job in representing us out there and being on that panel, and was fortunate enough to attend some other panel discussions that helped him quite a bit in his jobs as well. So that's my report.
Any word about the Holidays for Heroes coming in this weekend?
Oh, yes, I apologize. Thank you for reminding me. That is this Saturday. We don't have any itinerary yet. I haven't received anything. At one point in time, I know they were looking to get 9 individuals up from the AmeriCorps musical group. And Tom hasn't circled back with me. I'll have to find out.
They
but-
got it. They got
Did
it.
he? Okay. Normally, what Tom will do is provide us with, and/or the other fella, Mr. Topham. He sometimes coordinates this. They give us an itinerary so that, we coordinate them meeting the aircraft and set things up for them and stuff. So thank you for reminding me. I'll check on that.
I know they're coming in Friday, but
Okay.
I don't have any time.
I don't know, is it commercial or private, do you know, or?
It's private,
Okay. Yeah,
at least for those 9 out of DC.
I met with Tom on that and discussed some potential opportunities with him.
Mr. McCann had personal issues, a wedding of a daughter this weekend, so I think that's been his
Was that on
Interest.
island at least?
on island.
Oh, okay. Boy,
That may be
discuss it.
more stressful.
Is that one week? in
Well,
holidays?
the neighborhood seemed okay.
Oh, that's right, your next door neighbor.
Thank you. I will
And
think
Mr.
of
Topham's going to be busy with one this weekend, so. It's all the personal business I know of everybody.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
All right, we come to the matter of subcommittees. And you have in front of you a list of the committees as we have presently stand. And is there any reason to change or rejigger any of these committees?
No, we have to put
We
Mr.
have to
McLaurin
put
on.
people on them, but I mean, before we talk about who goes on what, are there any things that we want to change with respect to the committees themselves?
I'm happy to stay where I am.
Likewise.
And do you mean like the structure? Because last
No,
time
I'm-
you put like the long-range
We-
plans and policies with the airfield policy.
Right,
Put
we
that
did that,
together.
and that, but we actually haven't met, that committee. It's sort of been taken second fiddle to the master plan discussions we've had here at the commission
Right.
meetings. I think maybe we should meet before the public session on the master plan, if we don't have a chance to discuss it at the commission
I can't remember why we put the two together.
Because, again, they were all sort of tied in under the, at this point at least, under the master plan.
Oh, okay.
There's sort of that common thread goes through virtually all of the second one, the airfield policy and facilities maintenance, except with respect to fuel and any specific things to general aviation. You've got some issues you need to deal with, right, in the noise and environmental?
I'm happy with the environmental stuff here.
Yeah. But, I mean, there are some issues that committee has to...
Yeah, we're waiting for another member, we're just waiting for the other member for Noah. Noah has basically some stuff that he's put together, and we sort of put it on hold so that we could get a subcommittee together that then would make recommendations. I didn't want to do it as one.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Committee of one.
All right.
Would have been all right.
No disagreements, I hope.
Do we want to make changes in our existing assignments before we give Mr. Buscarin a chance to put his oar in the water? Everybody's happy?
Yeah.
What would you like to be involved in, Tony?
Well, I'm interested in the property and master plans, building. You've already got 3 highly qualified people there already. I wouldn't want to
And plus, it doesn't meet. so-
push in. Yeah. You know, noise, environment, and energy, I don't really know exactly what we can do about noise. Federal government, FAA preempts a lot of that stuff. We've got a
Well, I think
voluntary,
there
we've
are
got a
some,
voluntary program
I think
here.
there are some things that have been thought about as being possible to do, including changing our voluntary,
Sure.
potentially changing our voluntary
Right.
program. And I think if you'd be willing to serve on that, it would be great. With Mr.
Certainly, I'll
Gasparo.
accept any assignments
All right.
at this point.
And service and public relations, you want to try that as well?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Then I think we're set.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any commissioners' comments?
I just had one, which is related to, we have the upcoming emergency exercise on the 24th, and I've noticed that sort of with time and without enforcement, the end of Old South Road, where we have all that area before the gate posted as no parking, there's about a dozen cars over the whole summer that it's just become more and more. My
Back
suggestion
out
would be
again,
that
okay.
we should enforce go ticket those cars so that we don't end up with a lack of space should they need to stage there.
Okay.
I didn't want to bring it up at a commission level and
In
not
their-
just
in their
truck
free
this on.
time, the officers who are at the airport can come.
No, I think
Our
the
folks can
airport,
ticket it, too.
we
Do we
determined last
ticket?
time
We can
we can
ticket
do
too.
it
We
the same
ticket?
parking because it's our property.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just have
Thank
somebody
you.
do
That's a
it
good
regularly, you mean, to sweep around, to look and see who's there?
No, it's, you can just go down there, there's just all been stored, it's one of the things that, without enforcement, it just tends to snowball, and
Right.
so there's a dozen cars, and it's right where the fire trucks would pull
Mhm.
over, and anything else to get into that gate at the end of the road.
Yeah, we should have them out of there before the exercise.
Yeah, I've been down there, I haven't seen any at the gate, but I've seen some on the grass areas by the UPS and that. area.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch that, or I say bunch, but there's probably a dozen, been there most of the summer.
Okay, anything else from anybody? Is there public comment at this time?
Bobby? Nothing?
And make a motion to adjourn and to go to executive session, not to return to open session, for the
Under,
purpose of reviewing executive session minutes listed on the agenda, as well as for clause 3 to conduct a strategy session with respect to collective bargaining. I think that does it. Do you think I read the whole thing?
no, that's all right. We repeat ourselves.
Right.
But that's the motion
That's my
encompasses
motion.
the whole thing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We have to vote, roll call. Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
In favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. All right, thank you. Now we have have some things to sign, don't we?
Is David,
Yes,
is David going to be on the phone?
yes.
He should have.
Did you meet Denise? Here.
Oh, yeah.
And I always forget it.
She's an assistant. Janine just met him already a while ago.
What are you doing there, Bobby?
Is that, yeah. I'm Andrea, so nice to meet you.
Well, well, Janine is like jack of all trades.
Okay.
She's her assistant,
just-
jack of all
okay.
trades.
Forgot my whole meeting packet, and as we're discussing executive session. Yeah, David's going to be on the phone, he should have all key points. No, thanks, I appreciate it. That's all right.
My red one as I was jumping out of my truck.
Just a minute, sir.
Just the second time I've
And
done
this
it.
is Jamie, doesn't it,
What,
Jamie?
you want to sit outside?
When things get into
Our
executive
financial
session.
person.
Oh.
May, this is our new member, Mr.
Tony
Buscarin.
Buscarin.
May Williams.
Yes, we did.
Okay, yeah. It's hard to remember everything in the
I took a
beginning.
tour through, yeah.
Okay, get me going.
David sent me something back, says, look like you got a few issues going on.
Oh, where do I?
One page or more.
I think he said that
Okay.
Calling a lot. Okay. All right, well,
No,
how are you doing?
because
Good. Okay, thank you. Your back is okay?
the contract.
Still there. You and Janine, I'm going to kick you in the back. Not really. Jamie has a new hire, and she's really doing a lot of things, finding out different ways to record the money and stuff like that. So that's good.
Good. I don't think we've got a great handle on
Yeah,
the money.
yeah. She is, she has a different perspective, college education and all than I think our previous young lady did.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I'll
I'm so glad that Mr. Buscarin said that.
Said what?
That we're disadvantaged.
Oh, right on your idea.
You're a DVE.
And I voted to adopt that program, didn't I?
You have 3 copies of
Okay, honey, thank you. Did I put my middle initial? No, I didn't. So this is only for me, I think, only you need 2 signatures. I don't know what we just signed before.
insurances, copy 1.
I was authorizing Dan to sign the contracts for us after we approved them. Do I have to sign that?
No, you don't. You need, it's just 2 signatures you said. Okay.
Might need it.
Well, Jeanette gave her this one,
Oh, okay.
so
Please.
I know this is surplus.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that'd be perfect.
So you hadn't. Okay.
This is my filing system, how I
Yeah,
keep them
no
all
kidding.
for each meeting. And then I do my executive
And I was singing your praises, Jamie.
Oh, Archie, wow, nice system. I maybe should be modeling myself.
Sometimes I don't get back to putting those together for a little bit.
Oh, right.
Come from before that?
When I was doing,
Oh, really? Okay. Oh. Accounting major or,
For graduate.
okay. Okay, no, well, seems like you're well situated. Where in New Hampshire you're from? I know where that is, all in the river there.
What?
Sure. I used to live up in north of Plymouth in Campton.
It is Bill.
Waterville Valley ski area. Up there
David,
for a
you
while.
mind grabbing these?
And I just asked, and Mr. Buscarin thought he had met you, so I just, that's why I didn't.
Make it
introduce
Tony.
you. Tony, okay, Tony.
Yeah. Nice to meet you too.
What does that mean?
Very bureaucratic.
Handwritten at the time of signature. Isn't
Signature
it-
and date must be.
Oh, no auto pens.
I gave him the short version, not well explained.
Well, it's good to get a handle on the finances. It sounds like that's something of great interest here. Wow. Good.
Great. Well, good for you, Jamie.
Well, thank you, Jamie. Worth every nickel of your salary, it sounds like.
Yeah. Don't say too much, you might be looking for a raise. See you later, Jamie. Take care, hon.
Good night, Jamie.
Bye. So you wanted a holiday?
You're just so popular, Mr. Drake.
My anniversary. So I'm leaving Thursday, and I'm starting my told Tom, I said, Tom, I have to find out what I'm doing. I said, but it is my anniversary. You know, I got to try to make certain trips, you know what I mean?
Still, because we have to change the wedding.
Right.
So, so if I can get back once a month, that's what I try to do.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna
Thank you.
go out to AAA
We're gonna keep this one.
the end of this month, I think. And then what I do is I look at the next month, and if there's a holiday where I can drop them on it, and, you know, I do that.
More appropriately sized, thank you.
They've only been gone a few weeks, but boy, it seems like a long time.
Yeah, really, doesn't
And
it?
you go home and there's no dog there, there's nobody there. It's like, hey,
Yeah, really. We came
But I
back
do
and
think they're all done like
my-
this.
And
And I need
Katie
them in
came
order.
with us, and my brother came in, and it was just yesterday that everybody left. Fine. And then Neil booked it out of town with Katie. They drove together.
and now I gotta go back to my cooking and cleaning routine too.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
making dinners. It's, you make it work.
So I predicted Cordova.
Some of the buildings that were happening. Oh.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Once again, you like to do that once a month, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Next month, yeah.
Yeah, so Bobby was on the Libby Gibson show or whatever as a special guest. Talking about how much he liked to go to commission meetings and board of selectmen meetings.
Bobby, how is school going? Who's your teacher here? Miss Carlson. Oh, nice. Might need to give him a second. It's in there.
Okay.
Dan, I apologize. I didn't bring my union packet, but David's supposed to be on the phone tonight and should have all the information, so.
We could, I suppose, left the book at home.
We'll just hold on the minute.
Hold on a minute. Mr. Gasparo didn't really use it.
Is the meeting still on, or?
No, we're done.
Yes. And,
No, I got it. I gave you the, already, thanks.
Mr. Gasparo, we've been